Most people fear old age because they imagine weakness, loneliness, regret, and fading relevance. But Buddhism teaches something very different. Old age is not what destroys people. What destroys people is reaching old age without having lived with awareness, compassion, and purpose. Wrinkles do not frighten the wise. What frightens the wise is looking back and realizing life was spent chasing approval, possessions, and expectations that never truly satisfied the heart. This message is not about adding years to your life. It is about adding depth to your years, so that when the body slows down, the mind remains free, the heart remains light, and the soul feels complete. These are not things to do when you are old. These are things to do before old age arrives, so that when it does, you greet it without fear, without regret, and without emptiness. 1. Stop living for approval before it becomes a habit you can't escape. One of the deepest regrets people carry into old age is not about money, success, or missed opportunities. It is the quiet realization that much of their life was lived according to someone else's expectations. Buddhism teaches that when you attach your sense of worth to approval, you slowly lose connection with your true self. At first, it seems harmless. You adjust your words so others don't get upset. You hide parts of yourself to fit in. You make choices that earn praise instead of choices that bring inner peace. But over time, this way of living becomes automatic, almost like a habit you no longer question. When you live for approval, you begin saying yes even when your heart feels heavy. You agree to paths that drain you because you fear disappointing others. You stay silent in moments when your soul wants to speak because you are afraid of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. Buddhism reminds us that this fear does not come from others alone, but from attachment inside our own mind. The mind starts believing that love, respect, and belonging must be earned by obedience and self-sacrifice. Slowly, your inner voice grows quieter, and the voices of others grow louder. As the years pass, this pattern creates an invisible weight. You may look fine on the outside, but inside there is a quiet resentment toward life. Not because life was cruel, but because you never allowed yourself to live honestly. Many elders feel sadness not due to aging itself, but because they realize they spent decades playing roles that were never truly theirs. They followed expectations that did not reflect their values. They carried responsibilities that were never aligned with their spirit. This realization can be painful, especially when time feels limited. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins the moment you stop seeking permission to be yourself. Releasing the need for validation does not mean becoming selfish or careless. It means acting from awareness instead of fear. It means listening to your inner truth and respecting it, even when it is inconvenient. When your actions come from clarity rather than approval seeking, your life feels lighter and more meaningful. You begin to experience a quiet confidence that does not depend on praise or recognition. Before old age arrives, this lesson is crucial. Learn to notice when you are acting just to be liked, accepted, or admired. Pause and ask yourself whether the choice you are making brings peace or only temporary approval. Each time you choose honesty over fear, you strengthen your connection with your true self. Buddhism teaches that this inner alignment becomes a lifelong companion. When youth fades and external validation naturally decreases, the peace of living authentically remains. And that peace is something no age can take away. 2. Learn to sit with yourself in silence before loneliness teaches you the hard way. Many people fear old age not because of physical weakness, but because of the quiet that often comes with it. Fewer conversations, fewer visitors, fewer distractions. Buddhism teaches that this fear is not actually fear of being alone, but fear of meeting oneself without noise. Throughout life, many people stay constantly busy. They surround themselves with people, screens, conversations, and obligations, not because all of it is meaningful, but because silence makes them uncomfortable. Silence forces the mind to slow down, and when the mind slows down, unresolved thoughts and emotions begin to surface. At a young age, this avoidance may seem harmless. Life feels full. There is always somewhere to go, someone to talk to, something to scroll through. But as time passes, circumstances change. People move away, relationships shift, energy decreases. If a person has never learned how to sit peacefully with their own thoughts, this stage of life can feel unbearable. Loneliness becomes heavy, not because no one is around, but because the person never developed an inner relationship with themselves. Buddhism teaches that the mind can either be your greatest enemy or your greatest companion. When you never learn to observe your thoughts, the mind becomes restless, judgmental, and anxious in moments of quiet. Silence feels like punishment. Old age then becomes frightening because it brings more space to think and feel. But when you train the mind through awareness and gentle observation, silence becomes nourishing rather than threatening. Solitude turns into a place of rest instead of emptiness. Learning to sit with yourself does not mean isolating from the world. It means becoming comfortable in your own presence. It means being able to sit quietly without immediately needing entertainment or validation. Buddhism encourages simple practices like mindful breathing, slow walking, or sitting still and watching thoughts pass without judgment. These moments teach you that thoughts are temporary, emotions rise and fall, and you do not need to escape them to survive. Before old age arrives, this lesson is essential. Spend time alone intentionally, not as punishment, but as training. Learn to enjoy your own company. Listen to your inner world with patience instead of resistance. When silence becomes familiar, you stop fearing it. Then, when life naturally becomes quieter later on, you do not feel abandoned. You feel grounded. Buddhism teaches that a person who is at peace alone is never truly lonely. They carry their sense of wholeness within, regardless of age, circumstance, or external presence. 3. Let go of the illusion that more possessions will make life feel complete. One of the quiet traps people fall into long before old age arrives is the belief that happiness will come once they own a little more. A bigger house, better clothes, a newer phone, more savings, more comfort. Buddhism teaches that this belief is rooted in attachment, and attachment always promises fulfillment in the future while stealing peace in the present. At first, collecting possessions feels motivating. It gives direction, goals, and a sense of progress. But slowly, without realizing it, life begins to revolve around acquiring, protecting, and comparing. When your sense of security is tied to what you own, fear quietly enters your life. You fear loss. You fear falling behind. You fear not having enough. Even when you achieve what you once wanted, satisfaction is brief. The mind quickly moves the finish line forward. Buddhism explains that this endless wanting is not caused by lack, but by misunderstanding. The mind confuses comfort with contentment. Comfort can make life easier, but it cannot make life meaningful. Many people reach old age surrounded by possessions, yet feel an inner emptiness they cannot explain. Their homes are full, but their hearts feel strangely hollow. This happens because possessions were meant to support life, not replace purpose. When energy is spent primarily on accumulation, deeper needs are neglected. Connection, presence, gratitude, and inner peace quietly fade into the background. What remains is a life that looks successful on the outside, but feels incomplete on the inside. Buddhism teaches the practice of non-attachment, not as rejection of material life, but as freedom from being controlled by it. Non-attachment means using what you need without allowing it to define you. It means appreciating what you have without clinging to it for identity or worth. When you learn to enjoy simplicity, you begin to notice how little is actually required to feel at peace. A calm mind, a clear conscience, and meaningful moments become more valuable than objects. Before old age arrives, this lesson must be learned gently and intentionally. Start by noticing how often your happiness depends on buying, upgrading, or comparing. Ask yourself whether the things you pursue truly nourish your life or simply distract you from discomfort. Practice gratitude for what already supports you. Let go of excess, both physical and mental. Buddhism teaches that a lighter life makes the later years easier to carry. When you are no longer defined by what you own, aging does not feel like loss. It feels like release. 4. Heal old resentments before they harden into lifelong bitterness. One of the heaviest burdens a person can carry into old age is unresolved resentment. Buddhism teaches that anger and bitterness do not disappear with time. If they are not understood and released, they quietly grow stronger, shaping the way you see people, life, and even yourself. Many individuals believe that holding on to resentment is a form of strength or self-protection. In reality, it is a slow inner poison that damages the one who carries it far more than the one who caused the pain. Resentment often begins with a real wound. Someone betrayed your trust, disrespected you, neglected you, or treated you unfairly. The pain was genuine. Buddhism never asks you to deny that pain. What it warns against is clinging to the story of that pain long after the moment has passed. When the mind repeatedly replays old injuries, it keeps the nervous system trapped in the past. Even when life moves forward, the heart remains stuck. Over the years, this emotional weight settles deeply into the personality, turning disappointment into cynicism and hurt into bitterness. Many elders suffer not because life wronged them continuously, but because they never released the wounds of earlier chapters. They carry decades of silent anger toward parents, partners, friends, or even themselves. This unhealed resentment slowly colors everything. Joy feels distant. Trust feels dangerous. Compassion feels exhausting. Buddhism teaches that this suffering is not caused by others anymore, but by the mind's refusal to let go. The past continues to rule the present long after it has ended. Healing resentment does not mean pretending that harm did not happen. It does not mean excusing injustice or forcing false forgiveness. Buddhism teaches a deeper form of release. It begins with understanding that clinging to anger binds you to the very pain you wish to escape. When you hold resentment, you give the past power over your present peace. Letting go is not about them. It is about freeing your own heart from a prison it no longer needs to stay in. Before old age arrives, it is essential to face these emotional knots with honesty and patience. Sit with your pain instead of suppressing it. Observe the anger without feeding it. Ask yourself whether holding on to this story is still serving your life. Slowly, through awareness, compassion, and acceptance, the grip of resentment begins to loosen. Buddhism teaches that a heart free from bitterness ages gently. When old age comes, it should be a time of reflection and wisdom, not a time of reliving unresolved wounds. A light heart allows the later years of life to be lived with peace, clarity, and quiet dignity. 5. Serve something greater than yourself while you still have energy. One of the most painful realizations that can arrive in old age is the feeling that life was lived only for survival, routine, or personal gain, without leaving a meaningful imprint on the world. Buddhism teaches that a life centered solely on the self eventually feels empty, no matter how comfortable or successful it appears on the outside. Human beings are not fulfilled by consumption alone. They are fulfilled by contribution, connection, and the quiet knowing that their presence made life lighter for someone else. In early and middle life, Energy is often spent chasing stability, status, and security. These pursuits are not wrong, but they become dangerous when they are the only focus. When life revolves entirely around earning, protecting, and advancing oneself, the heart slowly disconnects from its deeper purpose. Buddhism explains that this disconnection creates a subtle dissatisfaction that no achievement can fully erase. People may reach their goals, yet still feel restless, unfulfilled, or strangely hollow. This is because meaning does not come from what you accumulate, but from what you give. As people grow older, their roles naturally change. Physical strength may decrease, careers slow down or end. Social circles become smaller. Those who built their entire identity around productivity often struggle during this stage. They ask themselves, "Who am I now that I cannot do what I once did?" Buddhism teaches that this suffering arises when self-worth is tied only to usefulness in a narrow sense. Those who never cultivated service beyond personal ambition often feel lost once external validation fades. Serving something greater than yourself protects you from this emptiness. Service does not mean sacrificing your life or neglecting your own needs. It means allowing your actions to extend beyond self-interest. It can be as simple as helping others without expecting praise, offering kindness where it is not required, sharing wisdom, or easing someone's burden through presence and care. Buddhism teaches that compassionate action purifies the heart. When you serve, you step outside the endless cycle of me, mine, and more, and touch a deeper sense of belonging. Many elders who feel peaceful are not those who achieved the most, but those who gave the most in quiet ways. They taught children, supported family, guided others, or showed compassion during difficult moments. Their lives feel meaningful because they were woven into the lives of others. They do not fear old age because their sense of worth does not depend on strength, speed, or productivity. It depends on having lived in alignment with compassion. Before old age arrives, this lesson must be practiced while energy is still available. Ask yourself where your actions are flowing. Are they only feeding personal goals, or are they also nourishing others? Look for opportunities to contribute without reward. Offer your time, attention, skills, or understanding where it is needed. Buddhism teaches that when you live in service, your later years become a season of quiet fulfillment rather than regret. Even when the body slows down, the heart remains full. And a full heart is one of the greatest protections against a meaningless life. 6. Care for your mind more than your image, because the mind is what you grow old with. One of the greatest misunderstandings in life is believing that how you look, how you are seen, or how you are admired matters more than how your mind functions. Buddhism teaches that the body is temporary, reputation is unstable, and image fades quickly, but the mind is something you carry every single day until your final breath. Many people spend decades polishing their outer image while neglecting the inner world that actually determines whether life feels peaceful or painful. This imbalance becomes painfully clear in old age. When people are young, image feels important. Appearance, status, titles, and how others perceive you seem to open doors and define worth. Society rewards looking strong, successful, and confident, even if the inner world is chaotic. Buddhism does not deny that the outer world matters, but it warns against mistaking it for the foundation of happiness. When all your energy is invested in appearance and approval, the mind is left untrained. And an untrained mind becomes restless, fearful, and fragile when circumstances change. As time passes, the body naturally changes, strength fades, beauty shifts, social roles disappear. If your sense of value was built mainly on how you looked or how you were admired, old age can feel like a slow loss of identity. Many elders suffer quietly because they no longer recognize themselves. They feel invisible, irrelevant, or forgotten. Buddhism teaches that this suffering is not caused by aging itself, but by placing identity in what was never meant to last. The mind, however, can grow stronger with age if it has been cared for properly. A mind trained in awareness, patience, and compassion becomes more stable over time. Buddhism emphasizes mental cultivation through mindfulness, right understanding, and gentle self-observation. When you learn to watch your thoughts instead of being controlled by them, life becomes lighter. Problems still arise, but they no longer dominate your inner world. You respond instead of reacting. You observe instead of collapsing. Neglecting the mind has serious consequences later in life. Unchecked worry turns into chronic anxiety. Suppressed emotions turn into bitterness. Constant comparison turns into insecurity. Old age then becomes mentally exhausting, even if life is materially comfortable. Buddhism teaches that suffering is shaped more by mental habits than by external conditions. A peaceful mind can live simply and still feel rich. A disturbed mind can have everything and still feel poor. Caring for your mind means becoming aware of what you feed it daily. The thoughts you repeat, the stories you believe about yourself, the judgments you hold against others, and the fears you entertain all shape your inner landscape. Buddhism teaches that the mind becomes what it practices. If you practice worry, the mind becomes anxious. If you practice anger, the mind becomes harsh. If you practice awareness, the mind becomes calm. This training does not happen automatically. It requires intention and patience. Before old age arrives, it is essential to develop a healthy relationship with your mind. Learn to pause instead of reacting. Learn to observe emotions without drowning in them. Learn to let thoughts pass without clinging to every story they tell. Meditation, mindfulness, and simple moments of stillness are not escapes from life. They are preparations for living well, especially when life slows down. Buddhism teaches that a person who understands their mind is never helpless, regardless of age. When the body weakens, the mind becomes the place you live in most. If that place is chaotic, old age feels frightening. If that place is calm, old age feels gentle. Caring for your mind is not about becoming emotionless or detached from humanity. It is about developing clarity, balance, and inner stability. Those who train their minds age with dignity. They may move slower, but their inner world remains steady. Buddhism reminds us that youth is borrowed, beauty is temporary, and status is fragile. But a well-cultivated mind becomes a lifelong refuge. When external identities fall away, inner wisdom remains. Before old age arrives, choose to invest where time cannot steal from you. Care for your mind more than your image, because in the end, the mind is what determines whether your later years are filled with fear or filled with peace. 7. Accept impermanence now, so change does not terrify you in old age. One of the deepest sources of suffering in human life is resistance to change. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is not a flaw in existence, but the very nature of it. Everything that arises will pass away. Youth, strength, roles, relationships, status, and even the sense of who you believe yourself to be are all temporary. Yet most people live as if life should remain fixed. They build identities around conditions that are guaranteed to change, and when those conditions shift, fear and confusion take over. Old age often becomes frightening, not because it is painful, but because it exposes how much a person resisted impermanence throughout their life. From a young age, people are encouraged to define themselves through roles and achievements. Career, reputation, physical ability, social influence, and productivity become the foundations of identity. Buddhism teaches that while these roles may serve a purpose for a time, clinging to them creates suffering. When life naturally begins to remove or change these roles, the mind panics. People ask themselves who they are without the titles, the strength, or the attention they once had. This inner panic is not caused by aging itself. It is caused by attachment to what was never permanent. Impermanence is often misunderstood as something negative, something to fear or avoid. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Impermanence is what allows growth, learning, healing, and renewal. Without change, there would be no movement, no evolution, and no possibility of transformation. The suffering comes not from change, but from clinging. When the mind demands that things stay the same, life feels like a constant threat. Old age then becomes a symbol of loss instead of a natural continuation of existence. Many elders suffer deeply because they spend their later years fighting reality. They resist the slowing body. They mourn past versions of themselves. They compare who they are now with who they used to be. This constant comparison drains energy and creates sadness that feels inescapable. Buddhism teaches that peace arises when you stop arguing with reality. Acceptance does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It means recognizing what is, without adding unnecessary suffering through resistance. Accepting impermanence begins long before old age arrives. It starts with noticing how everything in life changes, even in small ways. Moods shift, relationships evolve, interests fade. Circumstances transform. Buddhism encourages mindful observation of these changes, not to create detachment from life, but to deepen understanding of it. When you observe impermanence with awareness, you begin to loosen your grip. You stop demanding that life obey your expectations. This loosening creates inner flexibility, which becomes essential in old age. When impermanence is accepted, change no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a teacher. Each stage of life offers different forms of value. Youth offers energy. Middle age offers responsibility and growth. Old age offers reflection, wisdom, and perspective. Buddhism teaches that no stage is superior to another. Each is complete in its own way when lived with awareness. When you stop clinging to who you were, you make space for who you are becoming. The fear of aging often comes from the belief that worth is tied to usefulness, appearance, or productivity. Buddhism gently dismantles this belief. Your value is not determined by what you can do, but by how you are present. Old age does not remove meaning. It reveals whether meaning was built on solid ground or fragile identity. Those who accept impermanence early carry less fear later. They do not measure life by what has been lost, but by what is still alive within them. Accepting impermanence also prepares you for the ultimate truth of life, that nothing is owned, not even the body or the breath. Buddhism teaches this not to create despair, but to awaken appreciation. When you truly understand that everything is temporary, you stop postponing presence. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to live fully. You stop clinging to what cannot be held forever. Life becomes precious, not because it lasts, but because it changes. Before old age arrives, practice letting go in gentle ways. Release outdated identities. Allow relationships to change without bitterness. Accept physical and emotional shifts without self-judgment. Each small act of acceptance strengthens your ability to face larger changes later. Buddhism teaches that a person who has made peace with impermanence does not fear aging. They understand that change is not the end of meaning, but the continuation of life in a new form. When old age finally arrives, those who have accepted impermanence do not feel erased. They feel integrated. They carry fewer regrets because they did not cling to illusions. They greet change with humility instead of resistance. Their minds remain open, their hearts remain soft, and their presence remains valuable. This is why Buddhism teaches that wisdom grows when attachment loosens. Accept impermanence now, and old age will not feel like a loss. It will feel like a natural, meaningful chapter of a life lived with understanding. 8. Build inner meaning now, so your worth does not depend on productivity in old age. One of the quiet fears people carry about old age is the feeling of becoming useless. Society often measures worth by productivity, speed, and visible output. When a person can no longer work the same way, earn the same way, or perform the same way, they begin to question their value. Buddhism teaches that this fear is rooted in a misunderstanding of what makes a life meaningful. Meaning is not created by how much you produce. It is created by how deeply you understand, how gently you live, and how clearly you see reality. In earlier stages of life, productivity feels like purpose. You wake up with tasks, goals, deadlines, and responsibilities. Your sense of importance is reinforced by how needed you are. While responsibility has its place, Buddhism warns against confusing busyness with meaning. When life becomes only about doing, achieving, and proving, the inner world is neglected. Reflection, awareness, and inner development are postponed for later. Old age arrives, and later finally comes, but the inner foundation was never built. Many elders struggle not because they are incapable, but because their identity was entirely tied to activity. When the body slows down, the mind panics. Questions arise like, "Who am I if I am not useful?" Or, "What is my value now?" Buddhism teaches that these questions are painful only because worth was placed in conditions that naturally change. If meaning is built only on productivity, old age feels like a loss of self. But if meaning is built on inner qualities, old age becomes a time of quiet depth. Inner meaning comes from cultivating awareness, wisdom, compassion, and understanding. These qualities do not diminish with age. In fact, they deepen. Buddhism teaches that a person who has developed inner clarity becomes more valuable as life progresses, not less. Their presence calms others, their words carry weight, their silence holds wisdom. They do not need to rush or prove anything, they simply are. This kind of meaning cannot be taken away by time. When inner meaning is not developed early, old age can feel empty even if life was busy and successful. Without tasks to distract the mind, unresolved fears and doubts surface. People feel restless, bored, or invisible. Buddhism explains that boredom is not caused by lack of activity, but by lack of connection to the present moment. A mind that never learned to rest in awareness struggles deeply when stimulation decreases. Building inner meaning begins with learning to be present. It means valuing awareness over achievement. It means spending time understanding your thoughts, emotions, and motivations, instead of constantly escaping them. Buddhism encourages practices that strengthen inner life, such as mindfulness, reflection, ethical living, and compassionate action. These practices create a sense of wholeness that does not depend on external roles. Inner meaning also comes from aligning your life with values rather than outcomes. When your actions are guided by kindness, honesty, and clarity, life feels meaningful even when results are uncertain. Buddhism teaches that intention matters more than outcome. A person who lives with right intention carries peace within, regardless of age or circumstance. This peace becomes a stable anchor in old age, when external achievements no longer define daily life. Before old age arrives, it is important to ask yourself where your sense of worth truly comes from. Is it dependent on being busy, needed, or admired? Or is it grounded in awareness, presence, and understanding? Each moment spent cultivating inner life strengthens a form of wealth that time cannot steal. When productivity fades, inner meaning remains. Buddhism reminds us that life does not lose meaning when activity slows. It loses meaning only when awareness was never developed. Those who build inner meaning early do not fear becoming irrelevant. They know that being present, kind, and conscious is always valuable. When old age comes, they do not ask, "What can I do now?" They ask, "How can I be now?" And in that being, life continues to feel full, dignified, and deeply meaningful. 9. Make peace with your past before time forces you to face it. One of the quiet realities of old age is that the past becomes louder when the future becomes shorter. Memories surface more often. Old choices, missed chances, mistakes, and regrets replay themselves in the mind. Buddhism teaches that suffering in old age often has less to do with physical decline and more to do with unresolved inner conflict. When a person has not made peace with their past, time does not heal it. Time only gives it more space to echo. Many people move through life avoiding their past rather than understanding it. They stay busy so they do not have to reflect. They distract themselves so they do not have to feel. Painful memories are pushed aside with the hope that they will fade on their own. But Buddhism teaches that what is ignored does not disappear. It waits. And when life slows down, when distractions fall away, the past returns with full force. Old age then becomes emotionally heavy, not because life was bad, but because life was never fully processed. Regret is one of the most common sources of suffering later in life. Regret over words not spoken, love not expressed, courage not shown, and paths not taken. Buddhism does not teach that regret is a failure. It teaches that regret is a signal for understanding. The problem arises when regret turns into self-punishment. Many elders replay their past as a list of mistakes, judging their younger selves with harshness and shame. This creates unnecessary suffering because the mind is fighting what can no longer be changed. Making peace with your past does not mean pretending everything was right. It means looking back with wisdom instead of judgment. Buddhism teaches compassion not only toward others, but toward yourself. You made choices based on the awareness you had at that time. You acted with the tools, understanding, and emotional capacity available to you then. When you judge your past self using today's awareness, you create an unfair burden. Peace comes when you replace blame with understanding. Unhealed guilt also becomes heavier with age. Guilt over hurting others, failing responsibilities, or not living up to expectations can quietly dominate the inner world. Buddhism teaches that guilt without awareness becomes self-torture. True healing begins when guilt is transformed into responsibility and growth. You acknowledge what went wrong, learn from it, and allow that learning to soften your heart rather than harden it. Carrying guilt into old age without processing it turns reflection into suffering. Before old age arrives, it is essential to reflect intentionally on your life, not to dwell in the past, but to integrate it. Sit with your memories. Notice what still hurts. Notice what still brings shame or sadness. Instead of pushing it away, observe it gently. Buddhism teaches that awareness dissolves suffering. When you fully see an experience without resistance, its grip weakens. You stop reliving it emotionally, even if you remember it clearly. Forgiving yourself is one of the hardest and most necessary acts of inner work. Many people forgive others more easily than they forgive themselves. They carry the belief that self-punishment is deserved. Buddhism teaches that clinging to self-blame does not undo the past. It only poisons the present. Self-forgiveness does not erase responsibility. It releases you from unnecessary suffering so that wisdom can grow. When a person has made peace with their past, old age becomes a time of reflection rather than regret. Memories arise, but they do not overwhelm. Lessons remain, but bitterness fades. There is a quiet acceptance of what was, without constant wishing it had been different. Buddhism teaches that this acceptance is a form of freedom. You stop fighting time, you stop fighting yourself. Before old age arrives, do not wait for life to slow you down against your will. Choose to slow down now. Reflect, heal, understand. Make peace with your story while you still have the energy to grow from it. When you do, the past becomes a source of wisdom instead of pain, and when old age comes, you will not fear looking back. You will be able to look back with clarity, humility, and peace. 10. Learn to die to who you were, so you can fully live who you are becoming. One of the deepest reasons people fear old age is not the loss of youth, but the fear of losing identity. Buddhism teaches that suffering increases when you cling to a fixed idea of who you are supposed to be. From early life, people build identities around roles, labels, and stories. You are the strong one, the provider, the successful one, the problem solver, the admired one, the one who never fails. These identities feel solid and comforting, but Buddhism reminds us that they are temporary constructions of the mind. When time begins to dissolve these roles, fear appears, because the mind believes it is losing itself. Many people unknowingly resist aging because aging asks them to let go of old identities. When the body slows down, when authority fades, when attention decreases, the ego panics. It asks, "If I am no longer this person, then who am I?" Buddhism teaches that this panic arises from misunderstanding identity itself. You were never the role. You were never the image. You were never the story others believed about you. Those were temporary expressions, not your true essence. Throughout life, change constantly asks you to shed old versions of yourself. Childhood ends, youth ends, relationships change, careers evolve, yet many people resist these inner deaths. They cling to who they were at their peak, replaying past versions of themselves as proof of worth. Old age then feels cruel because it forces what they resisted all along. Buddhism teaches that suffering is not caused by change, but by refusal to change internally when life changes externally. Learning to die in the Buddhist sense does not mean physical death. It means letting go of outdated identities without fear. It means allowing the ego to soften instead of fighting to stay relevant. Buddhism teaches that true freedom comes when you stop trying to preserve an image and start living from awareness. When you release attachment to who you were, you make space for who you are now. This space is where wisdom grows. Many elders feel trapped because they live in comparison with their past selves. They compare their current energy to their former strength. They compare their current influence to past recognition. This comparison creates constant dissatisfaction. Buddhism teaches that comparison is a form of resistance to reality. When you stop measuring yourself against who you used to be, life becomes lighter. Each stage of life has its own dignity, its own gifts, and its own depth, but only if you allow it to exist fully. Before old age arrives, this lesson must be practiced consciously. Begin noticing where you are clinging to old identities. Are you holding on to a version of yourself that no longer fits your current life? Are you defining your worth by past achievements rather than present awareness? Buddhism encourages continuous inner renewal. You are not meant to stay the same. Growth is not accumulation, growth is shedding. Letting go of old selves also allows deeper qualities to emerge. When ambition softens, wisdom strengthens. When ego loosens, compassion deepens. When the need to impress fades, the ability to truly connect increases. Buddhism teaches that the later stages of life are not meant for proving, but for understanding. Those who accept this transition age with grace. Those who resist it age with bitterness. Learning to die to who you were prepares you for the greatest truth of life, that nothing personal is permanent. This understanding does not make life meaningless, it makes life intimate. When you stop clinging to identity, you start living directly. You listen more. You react less. You value presence over performance. Old age then becomes a time of integration rather than loss. Buddhism teaches that rebirth is not only something that happens after death, it happens many times within one lifetime. Each time you let go of an identity that no longer serves you, you are reborn into a deeper understanding of life. Before old age arrives, practice this inner dying gently and consciously. Release what no longer fits. Welcome what is emerging. When you do, aging will not feel like an ending. It will feel like a continuation of becoming, lived with humility, clarity, and peace. 11. Learn to be grateful before gratitude becomes regret. One of the most heartbreaking realizations that can arise in old age is recognizing how much beauty, opportunity, and blessing passed through your life unnoticed. Buddhism teaches that suffering is not only caused by pain, but also by blindness to what is already present. Many people spend their lives waiting for better conditions to be happy. They wait for more money, more time, more recognition, better relationships, or fewer problems. In doing so, they overlook the quiet miracles that are already part of their everyday existence. Old age then arrives, and suddenly the mind looks back and sees what it once ignored. Gratitude is not a habit people naturally develop when life is busy. When energy is high and the future feels long, the mind is always leaning forward. It focuses on what is missing rather than what is here. Buddhism explains that this forward-leaning mind is never satisfied because desire always creates another desire. When gratitude is postponed, life feels like a constant preparation for happiness instead of happiness itself. Years pass quickly in this state, and meaning is quietly delayed. Many elders experience regret not because their lives were terrible, but because they failed to appreciate them while they were happening. They remember moments they rushed through, people they took for granted, and simple joys they dismissed as ordinary. The sound of laughter in the house, the strength of the body, the presence of loved ones, the ability to move freely, to learn, to start again. These things felt permanent at the time, so they were not honored. Buddhism teaches that the mind often recognizes value only after it is gone, and this delayed recognition becomes a source of pain. Gratitude is not about pretending life is perfect. Buddhism never teaches denial of suffering. Gratitude is about seeing clearly. It is about recognizing that life is always a mixture of difficulty and gift. When the mind trains itself to notice only what is wrong, life feels heavy. When the mind trains itself to notice what is still right, life feels workable. Gratitude shifts attention from scarcity to sufficiency, from complaint to appreciation, from restlessness to peace. Without gratitude, old age can feel like a list of losses. Strength lost, youth lost, opportunities lost, people lost. But Buddhism teaches that this perception is shaped by habit. A mind that practiced gratitude earlier sees old age differently. It sees memories instead of regrets. It sees lessons instead of failures. It sees life as something that was lived, not something that was missed. Gratitude turns reflection into warmth instead of sorrow. Learning gratitude before old age arrives requires intention. It means slowing down enough to notice what is often overlooked, the breath that comes without effort, the body that still carries you. The people who show up in small, consistent ways, the moments of calm between difficulties. Buddhism teaches that these ordinary moments are the true substance of life. When you recognize them, life stops feeling like a race and starts feeling like a gift. Gratitude also softens the heart. A grateful mind is less angry, less resentful, and less bitter. It becomes easier to forgive when you recognize how much you have received. It becomes easier to accept change when you appreciate what has already been experienced. Buddhism teaches that gratitude is a powerful antidote to envy, regret, and dissatisfaction. It anchors the mind in the present instead of trapping it in comparison. Many people believe gratitude will come naturally later when life slows down. Buddhism warns against this assumption. Gratitude does not appear automatically with age. It appears with awareness. Without practice, old age often amplifies complaint rather than appreciation. The mind becomes skilled at noticing decline instead of depth. But when gratitude has been cultivated throughout life, old age becomes a time of quiet thankfulness. Even limitations are met with gentleness because the heart remembers how full life once was. Before old age arrives, begin practicing gratitude deliberately, not as a forced exercise, but as a way of seeing. Each day, notice something simple that supports your life. A moment of calm, a shared smile, a task completed, a lesson learned. Buddhism teaches that gratitude grows through repetition. The more you notice, the more you see. Over time, this way of seeing becomes natural. When gratitude is present, life feels meaningful even without constant excitement. When old age comes, gratitude becomes a companion rather than regret. You do not mourn life for what it failed to give you. You honor it for what it already gave. Buddhism teaches that a grateful heart ages peacefully. It does not cling desperately to what is gone. It rests gently in what was lived, what was learned, and what was enough. Old age is not something that suddenly arrives one day and changes everything. It is the result of how you have been living all along. Buddhism teaches that the quality of your later years is shaped quietly, day by day, by the choices you make now. A meaningless old age is not caused by wrinkles, weakness, or time. It is caused by living without awareness, without reflection, and without inner growth, while there was still space to choose differently. When you live for approval, avoid silence, chase possessions, hold resentment, and tie your worth only to productivity, old age feels like loss. But when you learn to live with honesty, presence, compassion, acceptance, and gratitude, old age becomes a natural continuation of a meaningful life. The body may slow down, but the heart remains light. The outer world may grow quieter, but the inner world becomes rich. Buddhism does not ask you to fear aging. It asks you to understand life. It reminds you that meaning is not something you find at the end. It is something you build throughout the journey. Each lesson you practice now becomes a form of protection later. Each act of awareness becomes a source of peace. Each moment lived consciously becomes a memory that brings warmth instead of regret. Do not wait for old age to teach you these truths through pain and limitation. Learn them while you still have choice, energy, and clarity. Live in a way that allows you to look back without bitterness and forward without fear. When old age finally comes, may it find you not empty, not resentful, and not afraid, but calm, grateful, and complete.